More than a year after the state resolved an illegal prison strike in the corrections system, which resulted in more than 2,000 staffers getting fired, the State Department of Corrections is still in a period of turmoil, with programming not fully restored in prisons, National Guard members still serving as support staff, and an ongoing debate over the implementation of solitary confinement reforms. And in April, the union representing corrections staff wrote to the governor that they feel the situation behind bars is, quote, increasingly unstable and dangerous for everyone who lives and works behind the walls. For more on this dynamic, we're joined remotely by Assemblymember Michael Cashman, a Plattsburgh Democrat whose district includes multiple correction facilities. Welcome back to the show, Assemblymember.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So I think it would be fair to say there is widespread agreement that the status quo in New York's prisons is not working for the people who live or work there. But depending on who you ask, you get different interpretations of what the problems are and what the solutions are. So from your perspective, what do you see as some of the most pressing needs in the correction system right now?
Well, let me start with this general context, because I think it's really critical as the new assembly member for this district. The way that I look at it is whether you are a teacher, whether you work for DOT, whether you work for corrections, every state employee deserves a safe work environment. And our correction facilities are not safe right now for the correction officers and the incarcerated. And we need New York State to step up and deal with this reality. That's why I amplified the calls of the NYSCOBA union and have been doing the tours and listening to people directly, both in district, down at the Capitol, and having conversations. You know, we are continuing to get substances behind the walls that are creating chemical issues. There are still fights. I mean, there's a wide range of things, but this continues to be a powder keg with a very short fuse.
Well, let's talk about that issue of safety because, again, that's one of those contentious issues that people agree, yes, it is not safe, but how do you achieve safety? You get a wide range of responses. So are there any short-term fixes as the state does try to boost the overall workforce and get the benefit of that?
There is. So I'm actually carrying a bill that would address the residential rehabilitation units, for example. We don't need two people in any cell if we can help it. Right? These are adult men and women in spaces. Make sure that they're in a single cell. That's one thing that we can be doing. We certainly have the space in some of the facilities. The other things that we need to do is when individuals need to have corrective measures made, we can't just be taking a tablet away from one incarcerated member, because what they simply do is they go to another cell or to another individual and use their materials. We should be creating a separate unit that ensures that individuals really are getting the resources that they have been taken away from, as one example.
So that brings into mind the idea of, do you want to approach it with a carrot or stick mentality? And when you're talking about a more punitive or ensuring there's a punitive response to, say, bad behavior, sounds like you're thinking the stick. Why lean that way as opposed to lean into the carrot approach and try to incentivize good behavior more actively?
Well, I think it's actually not a carrot or stick. I think what we need to do is to make sure that we have many resources. The way that I tell people is, when you're addressing a project, you have many tools in the toolbox. And the Allen wrench may not be a tool that you use very often, but when you do, you save your knuckles. So there should be tools in that toolbox that are there to address the specific needs of a specific issue that is developing.
So last year, the governor was largely forced to address some of the broader concerns with the prison system, and there was an omnibus reform bill that was ultimately signed with some amendments at the end of the year. Are you seeing any demonstrable changes, though, in the way the state approaches the corrections system, or does it seem to be business as usual mostly?
We're not seeing the changes in the reform that our correction officers and civilians and even the incarcerated are looking for. And that's the part that's very, very frustrating. The governor and others made this about something other than safety when we were seeing the strike. And that was frustrating by itself. And here we are having to continue to advocate for resources. again, I'm unapologetic in my position because these men and women are in these facilities every single day. And they're not seeing the changes. We're not seeing the retainment or the recruitment. There is something of the statement of about approximately, I think 25% of that workforce is going to retire within about the next 5 years. Something has to change, not just for the men and women now, but for moving forward with these facilities.
And broadly speaking, do you have faith in the prison system as an institution? Because one of the concerns that we hear is that when there is violence or when there are instances of bad behavior from staff and guards, that the concern is that this is not just emblematic of bad apples, that this is feeding into a broader institutional problem, and that if you're going to try to address anything in the prison system, you basically have to start from scratch. Do you agree with that, assessment, or do you think that the system itself can work and it just needs improvements around the margins?
Yeah, I don't believe in that framework, meaning that it's everything. Unfortunately, we have seen a number of individuals take political positions rather than focus on the personnel that's behind the walls. And again, I mean the COs, the civilians, the incarcerated. I want to see safety be the paramount issue of these things. I want to see programs and services. I've talked with a number of COs that are very proud of the work that they have done with the incarcerated to help them, get back on track through programs and services and things like that. So let's stay focused on the here and now, on the safety issues, and let's continue to have a wide range conversations. Things do change, but the conversation that I'm having every single day here in the district, throughout the district, is safety is the main concern.
Well, before we move on, let me reintroduce you for listeners just joining us. This is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're speaking with Assemblymember Michael Cashman, a Plattsburgh area Democrat. So for about 3 years now, the State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision has been led by Daniel Marticello, and there have been concerns about his leadership at the top, while at the same time, others have expressed kind of unwavering support for him. Where do you fit in that landscape as it pertains to him, the job he's doing, and I guess his future with the department?
Yeah, I think it's really important as the new guy. I'm agnostic at the moment, but I'm talking with people. I'm talking with the men and women that serve under him, talking with the civilians and the families that are seeing the stress on our COs. I'm talking with other statewide leaders. I'm agnostic in the moment, but I will say this: that there are many concerns that I am seeing that are grown with validation, and looking through the lens of safety, more absolutely unequivocally needs to be done. And I'm unabashed in that statement.
Well, moving forward, what do you think is the best way to craft policy here in Albany that is designed to address the prison system? Because we've seen in some cases the department itself will convene some stakeholders, but maybe not include everyone, or you'll see lawmakers in the majority will hear from the impacted incarcerated population, but maybe not fold in the prison staff as well. So what makes sense moving forward to ensure that there is a comprehensive set of solutions that maybe do actually factor in various points of view? Or are the different points of view so at odds with each other that it doesn't make something like that even possible?
Sure. So, I don't think I've ever seen or heard or even used the word as much of my life until I was down in Albany. But I think we need to triangulate this. And what I mean by this in my interpretation is you do need to get the various stakeholders together. And I think safety is something that can bring people to the table and keep people at the table with a common understanding of there are some common sense things that can occur. We need to reduce the chemicals that are entering the facility. We need to make sure that spaces are safe for the CEOs, the civilians, and the incarcerated. If our facilities have the space, why are we not leveraging these resources and tools right away? Tablets, for instance, individuals have received tablets. If we can reduce the amount of mail that has substances on them from time to time, is it happening on every parcel? No, but we should be using the digital resources to eliminate some of those chemicals getting into our facilities. And the secondary issue too is we need to bring people in the downstream impact of this, like our local EMS providers, which when there's a chemical reaction at the facilities, they're queuing up and they're staying at these facilities for hours. And while a parent in one of our small rural communities is having a heart attack, we are now strained with EMS services. We know that there's an EMS crisis and volunteer firefighter crisis that's occurring throughout the state. Think about 93% of New York is supported by volunteer firefighters. So we got to look at the secondary impacts of these things, and we actually need to bring more people to the table rather than less people to the table.
Well, finally, one of the entities that the governor pointed to as an important oversight force in the wake of the killing of Robert Brooks in late 2024 was the Correctional Association of New York. And there was this idea of them having this outsized monitoring and enforcement role, but in reality, there has not necessarily been the money that was expected to support their effort. So I guess I'm curious, what do you see as the role of the Correctional Association of New York, both as an oversight agency and as a force for change? And do you think there's a case to be made for giving them additional dollars above and beyond what the governor proposed in this year's budget?
Right. So again, I'm focused on, my folks that are here, the correctional officers and the civilians, and they're not receiving their fair share of resources. There's a staffing issue. There's a staffing crisis. We have the National Guard there, yet we can't get the death gamble bill to move forward. So those are the things that I'm advocating for. I will continue to be in conversations with people about what the reform that you're suggesting may look like. But right now, I'm focused on bringing the attention to the safety issues through the lens of the people that work there day in and day out.
Well, we've been speaking with Assemblymember Michael Cashman. He is a Plattsburgh area Democrat. Assemblymember, thanks so much for making the time.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Support for the Capitol Press Room comes from O'Donnell and Associates, a public affairs firm providing strategic guidance to businesses and nonprofits on navigating policy and regulatory issues. More information is available at o'donnellsolutions.com.